LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Man-Eaters of Tsavo by J.H. Patterson, Chapter 25. Towards the end of my stay in British East Africa, I dined one evening with Mr. Ryle, the superintendent of the police, in his inspection carriage on the railway. Poor Ryle, I little thought then what a terrible fate was to overtake him, only a few months later in that very carriage in which we dined. A man-eating lion had taken up his quarters at a little roadside station called Kimma, and had developed an extraordinary taste for the members of the railway staff. He was a most daring brute, quite indifferent as to whether he carried off the station master, the signalman, or the pointsman, and one night in his efforts to obtain a meal, he actually climbed up on the roof of the station buildings and tried to tear off the corrugated iron sheets. At this, the terrified baboo in charge of the telegraph instrument below sent the following laconic message to the traffic manager: "Lion fighting with station. Send urgent succour." Fortunately, he was not victorious in his fight with the station, but he tried so hard to get in that he cut his feet badly on the iron sheeting, leaving large blood stains on the roof. Another night, however, he succeeded in carrying off the native driver of the pumping engine, and soon afterwards added several other victims to his list. On one occasion, an engine driver arranged to sit up all night in a large iron water tank in the hope of getting a shot at him, and had a loophole cut in the side of the tank from which to fire. But as so often happens, the hunter became the hunted. The lion turned up in the middle of the night, overthrew the tank, and actually tried to drag the driver out through the narrow circular hole in the top through which he had squeezed in. Fortunately, the tank was just too deep for the brute to be able to reach the man at the bottom, but the latter was naturally half paralyzed with fear, and had to crouch so low down as to be unable to take anything like proper aim. He fired, however, and succeeded in frightening the lion away, for the time being. It was in a vain attempt to destroy this pest that poor Ryle met his tragic and untimely end. On June 6, 1900, he was traveling up in his inspection carriage from Makindu to Nairobi, accompanied by two friends, Mr. Hubner and Mr. Parenti. When they reached Kimma, which is about 250 miles from Mombasa, they were told that the man-eater had been seen close to the station only a short time before their train arrived, so they at once made up their minds to remain there for the night and endeavor to shoot him. Ryle's carriage was accordingly detached from the train and shunted into a siding close to the station, where, owing to the unfinished state of the line, it did not stand perfectly level, but had a pronounced list to one side. In the afternoon the three friends went out to look for the lion, but finding no traces of him whatever, they returned to the carriage for dinner. Afterwards they all sat up on guard for some time, but the only noticeable thing they saw was what they took to be two very bright and steady glowworms. After events proved that these could have been nothing else than the eyes of the man-eater steadily watching them all the time and studying their every movement. The hour now growing late, and there being apparently no sign of the lion, Ryle persuaded his two friends to lie down, while he kept the first watch, and Hubner occupied the high berth over the table on the one side of the carriage, the only other berth being on the opposite side of the compartment and lower down. This Ryle offered to Parenti, who declined it, saying that he would be quite comfortable on the floor, and he accordingly lay down to sleep with his feet towards the sliding door, which gave admission the carriage. It is supposed that Ryle, after watching for some considerable time, must have come to the conclusion that the lion was not going to make its appearance that night, for he lay down on the lower berth and dozed off. No sooner had he done so, doubtless, than the cunning man-eater began cautiously to stalk the three sleepers. In order to reach the little platform at the end of the carriage, he had to mount two very high steps from the railway line,